Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar. We are going to start, although we are still expecting a few more participants. But for those of you who know me, I quite like to start things on time if possible, because if you don't start on time, you won't finish on time. And as many of you are joining us during your lunch hour, it's really important that we get on and that you hear what our wonderful array of speakers have to say this afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Anne Jones and I'm the NFWI chair. And I'll be introducing the session this afternoon, but then I'll hand over the entire meeting to Nikki Amos, who is the Chair of Public Affairs, and she will run the event today. Before we start though, I'd like to say that the Make a Match campaign was launched in 2020. And this was because you as members thought that this was a campaign that we should get involved in, that stem cell donation was a critically important part of the health service, and that we needed more people to join on to the registers. So this is why the campaign was brought up by a member and passed in one of our annual meetings in 2020. So well done on that. We know that members are very passionate about this issue, and since the campaign, we know that many of you got involved in discussions about it, raised awareness about the issue, and individually you have fundraised for it as well. Of course, not in the name of the WI, because we are a charity and we cannot fundraise. Now, today's discussion is a further opportunity for you to gain a better understanding of the issue, and what more we can all be doing on this important issue. And we hope that this will help you to engage with different organizations, get your family and friends on board, and make sure that this critically important issue is at the top of our agenda and at the forefront of our minds. So I'll now hand over to Nikki and not waste any more of your time, and look forward to hearing from our very interesting lineup of speakers. Nikki.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here today to chair this webinar, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our excellent panel of speakers. A few housekeeping points to mention. Today, we're using Zoom webinar for this call. This might look a little bit different to other Zoom calls you've been on, as you can only see and hear me, our speakers, the chair of the WI, and the WI Public Affairs staff. This is to make the webinar as easy to follow as possible. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. Staying on the call implies you consent to this, but as we are using Zoom webinar software, your identity will not be shown as part of the recording. Given that the recording will be available on the WI's member-only platform, MyWI, please only bring up what you are comfortable being shared more widely. So I would advise against mentioning anything that's confidential. In order to streamline this event, can I introduce all our speakers at the outset? We will then be able to move swiftly from one speaker to the next, as I know many of you are joining us during your lunch hours. We will begin by hearing from our first speaker, Dr. Rhys Morgan from the University of Sussex. Dr. Morgan is a lecturer in biomedical science, and his research interests include cell signalling and leukemia. He is also an advocate of stem cell donation and has worked with Anthony Nolan and Marrow to promote awareness of the need for more stem cell donors. Dr. Morgan will talk about the urgent need for more stem cell donors and the myths and misconceptions that exist. He will also offer an overview of how the registration process works. Next, we will hear from Werner Brackett from ACLT. That's the Afro-Caribbean Leukaemia Trust. Werner will talk about the particular need for more donors from minority ethnic backgrounds and what can be done to address this. ACLT is a leading blood cancer disorder charity dedicated to raising awareness of the severe shortage of donors on the UK stem cell, blood and organ donor registers. ACLT works to improve the odds of finding matches by registering potential donors from all ethnicities, with a focus on donors from the African and Caribbean communities. We will hear from a medical neuroscience student at University of Sussex, Julia Reinstein, who was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia in her first year at university and has recently received a stem cell transplant. Finally, WI member Ruth Ainsworth from League of Ladies WI, one of our Derbyshire WIs, will share her experience of registering as a potential stem cell donor, as well as her work campaigning on this issue. Following the 4 speakers, I will moderate a 20-minute question and answer session. Here, you will be able to ask the speakers questions and share and get feedback on any campaigning ideas you might have. If you want to ask a question during the Q&A, please type your question in the Q&A box. The Q&A button can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen, next to the green button asking you to share your screen. If you click on the Q&A button, a white bar will appear on the right-hand side of your screen. Click in that box that says type your message here, but do include your name and your WI. I will then read out your question. We have disabled the chat box for this session to make sure that the session stays on track time-wise. However, if you have any technical problems, do email the Public Affairs team who will be monitoring their inboxes. With no further ado, can I hand over to Dr. Rhys Morgan from the University of Sussex to talk to us about stem cell donor registration. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got some slides to share with you. So hopefully you can all see this. Can everyone see this okay? Good, that's always a good start. So first of all, many thanks for the invitation to come and talk to you today. It's a huge privilege to talk to the WI. And despite anything I might have done in science, my gran would be most proud of this achievement, as she was a proud member of the WI at her time. Not that she'd have ever been able to have logged onto a webinar, but she would have enjoyed the content nonetheless. So this is a picture of me donating my stem cells in 2016. A lot of my mates get a bit grossed out by this picture because they think I'm holding up a colostomy bag. It is not a colostomy bag. It is a bag of nice, juicy stem cells. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what stem cells are and why they're needed. I'm going to talk about how they're extracted and used. I'm going to talk about and hopefully debunk 6 common myths you often hear around stem cell donation. And then I'm going to talk about what you can maybe do as an organization to help. So let's go into the bone marrow. And this is where you find these incredibly special cells called hematopoietic stem cells, okay? And hematopoietic is just a posh word for blood. Okay, so, and these stem cells are really special, and ultimately they can develop into, ignore these complicated steps in the middle, but they develop into these mature blood cells which have important functions in the body, okay? Some of them you might recognize, such as red blood cells or platelets. So what happens with abnormal blood development is you get genetic damage to these stem cells, which makes them abnormal, okay? So instead of developing into these healthy blood cells, which have important functions, you get a block in their development. And instead you get conditions around abnormal blood stem cells, such as cancers, leukemias and lymphomas, autoimmune conditions, anemia, sickle cell disease, or maybe myelofibrosis. And you may even know some people that have potentially suffered from these conditions. So the object of a stem cell transplant really is to reset the system, okay? So to replace these abnormal stem cells with nice, healthy stem cells from a donor. There's different types of stem cell transplant. You could have an autologous one. So this is your own stem cells, your healthy stem cells, which are reinfused back in. You can have allogeneic, which come from a matched donor, a HLA matched donor, which we'll come on to in a second what that means. Or they could be syngeneic, which means they come from an identical twin that's matched to you. But what we're really talking about with stem cell donation is this middle one here. So this is allogeneic stem cell transplantation. Okay, so let's just go over the steps of a stem cell transplant. So you have your donor who is given a pre-treatment to release the stem cells into peripheral circulation because they're normally in the marrow. Okay, these are collected from the bloodstream by apheresis. They're taken off to the lab where they're frozen and stored till they're needed. You have your leukemia patient then, or maybe your patient who suffers from a blood disorder. They have very powerful chemotherapy which wipes out their existing marrow and stem cells. And what happens then is the stem cells that are donated are prepared, and by a quite miraculous procedure, which always makes me, always shocked and surprised by it, is they can be injected into the arm and they will find their way back to the bone marrow to establish a brand new blood system in that individual. Now, this is a very dangerous procedure, and these patients effectively have no immunity for about a month, so they have to be really well protected, almost in bubbles. But eventually a new healthy blood system should be established. So before you donate your stem cells, you have a series of injections with a molecule called GCSF, okay? And what this does, when you give that injection, it increases the number of stem cells which are inside the bone marrow, okay? The other really interesting thing that it does is these stem cells are anchored inside the bone marrow by a couple of molecules. And this GCSF injection, they come along and it breaks those bonds and it releases the stem cells into peripheral circulation, okay? So when they're in peripheral circulation, not in the bone marrow, they can be collected by this process here, which is called apheresis, okay? So the blood comes out of one vein, moves into, through a series of tubes, moves into a machine. The machine separates the stem cells from the blood. The stem cells are kept and the blood is returned back to the recipient, the parts that aren't needed, like red blood cells, platelets. So they don't take anything that isn't needed. Okay, so let's come on to this process called HLA typing, why it's important to match donors. So let's say my immune cells encounter some other cells inside my body, say skin cells, lung cells, something like that. The first question they're going to ask is this self? Does this belong to me? Okay, and what they do is they almost use a barcode, a scan of some proteins which are on the outside of the cell called human leukocyte antigens. Okay, that's where HLA comes from. And if those antigens match up, the immune system knows to leave those cells alone because they belong to the body. But let's take an alternative scenario where my immune cells see some donor cells. It does the scan to see what the HLA antigens look like, and they don't match up. Okay, if they don't match up, the instruction from the immune system is to attack and kill those cells. So it's really important that these human leukocyte antigens, the HLAs, are exactly matched as best they can. And when you're called to be a stem cell donor, they'll look at your genotype and they'll check that all the different genes which make up your HLA type match nicely with a donor, okay? Or nicely with the recipient, I should say, who's receiving your stem cells. And we're really aiming for a 10 out of 10 match. We're trying to check the cytomegalovirus status is correct. And we're also aiming for younger donors if we can as well, because the younger donors tend to have a higher rates of transplant success. And what we're really trying to avoid by not getting the HLA types matched is this condition here called graft versus host disease. So this is where the stem cell donation is attacked by the host immune system. And in its very mild form, it can lead to these kind of systemic rashes across the body. But in its more serious form, it can really produce sort of crippling, dangerous inflammation. So it's really important that those HLA types are matched as accurately as possible. So that's a bit of the science behind stem cell donation. I just want to finish the second part with talking about debunking some common myths that you hear around stem cell donation. So the first one you always hear is, it's too much hassle to sign up and I don't have the time. Well, let's rubbish that one straight away. So you can request a swab pack online from Anthony Nolan. It'll arrive in days. You simply swab your cheek for 30 seconds. These are some students that we recruited at Sussex a couple of years ago. You put it in the prepaid envelope, you send it off in the post. So it's really easy. And if you already give blood, if you donate your blood, you can actually ask them to take another tube and they'll send that off as well to the bone marrow registry. Another common myth, I've heard it hurts. Well, this is the summary of my wounds from my stem cell donation in 2016. That's the inside of my elbow and that's a tiny little plaster. So unless you've got a real fundamental problem with needles, that's hard to avoid with stem cell donation, but there's no real sort of invasive procedure here. You have the GCSF injections leading up to the donation, which can cause mild back pain or fatigue. The donation process itself takes about 4 to 5 hours, but you're very comfortable throughout. And sometimes the GCSF doesn't quite raise enough stem cells in peripheral circulation, so you may have to have a bone marrow extraction, but that is generally done under general or local anesthetic, and it's not too bad. You might have a mild limp the day after. What about damaging my bone marrow? People often say, or donors might say. Well, again, this is not something you have to worry about. Not all the stem cells are released and extracted. Some obviously stay behind. All other blood components that aren't used are returned to the other arm. Remember, you can see me here hooked up. One arm's taking it to the machine. The other tube is feeding back the blood products which aren't required. So you don't lose anything you don't need, basically. And long-term scientific studies have shown there's absolutely no long-term consequences of stem cell donation at all. I can't afford the journey or the time off work. Okay, so what's brilliant is these GCSF injections. This is me having them at home. So the district nurse will come out. She will give the injections at your home or your workplace, whichever you choose. Anthony Nolan will pay your travel, your food, your accommodation, and any loss of earnings up to a certain point. And donations are generally timed over the weekend, so they're not too disruptive. There's loads of people signed up. I don't need to register. That's also not true. The UK is badly lacking behind other European nations, such as Germany, in terms of recruitment rates. The COVID-19 pandemic, like so many things, has really hindered recruitment because people just haven't been able to get out and about enough. Young males are really underrepresented. They tend to be the cohort which is most often called to give donations. And as we're going to hear about today, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic BAME groups are still really extremely difficult to recruit because they tend to have quite complex HLA genotypes. And also there are often religious or cultural boundaries to them being able to sign up as a donor. And the final one, I'm too old to sign up and donate. Well, I dare say for many of you that might be true. I don't want to be too rude there, but there are restrictions on ages, but there are a range. So the British Bone Marrow Registry will take you up to 40 years old, DKMS another one up to 55, and Anthony Nolan between 16 and 30. And there's a very good reason for that. It's that younger donations tend to have higher success rates with the transplant. So finally, what can you do? So as an organization, most important thing you can do is spread the word about stem cell donation, how easy it is, follow the campaigns on social media when they try and find donors for specific people who are suffering from diseases. Tell them about Julia's story, which you're about to hear, which is amazing. You can also fundraise and donate to Anthony Nolan or DKMS. These are charities. They receive no government money at all. And it costs around £40 to put someone onto the registers. So if you were to do a cake sale or something and raise £200, you've put five potential life-saving donors onto the register, which is really good. And finally, you can request swab kits and you can host community sign-up events as well. So you get the kits from Anthony Nolan and you can do the swabs at a church or village hall or something like that. So that's it. I've gone slightly over time. Sorry, Nikki. But yeah, if you want to learn any more about it, when I donated, my blog was featured in the Mirror Online. And we also did a couple of YouTube videos with Julia and Alistair talking about stem cell donation last year, which are freely available. So I'll stop my share. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morgan. Can I call on Verna Brackett from ACLT to present too, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for giving up your time to listen to this presentation. Let me tell you a little bit, first of all, about the ACLT. The organization was formed 25 years ago by the parents of then leukemia sufferer Daniel DeGale. Daniel was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 6. After going through several treatments and stuff, which was failed, Daniel parents was informed that he needs a bone marrow transplant. At the time, the Antoinette Trust been going for 25 years, and they've only managed to recruit 550 individuals from the African Caribbean mixed race background onto the register. Bevan Oren was informed that the chance of finding a life-saving match for Daniel was 1 in 250,000 chances, compared to someone from a European white background, which is 1 in 4, 1 in 5 at the time. So they took on the mantra to go out and educate and bring awareness to the Black community about needing a stem cell transplant and joining the bone marrow register. We at the ACLT, we work with the 3 groups, the 3 registers, which is DKMS, Anthony Nolan, and also the British Bone Marrow Register. And we encourage people to join those registers by either linking through our website, or we work really closely with them. What we've been doing, and why there's a particular need for more Black donors. You're seeing the slide on there. That is unfortunately some of the people we have lost. And it's not just them, there's a long roll call of people. And the point here is that these people are dying because we're not getting many people on the register. It was very interesting listening to Dr. Morgan's talking about the myth. And if we could have the next slide, please. First of all, this is Antoinette. Antoinette is needed stem cell transplant, and Antoinette's been diagnosed since 2010. She actually had her bone marrow cleaned and replaced, but unfortunately that didn't work. So now she desperately needs an unrelated donor. Antoinette is one of the many people we're working with at the moment, we support them by helping them, going to the hospital, getting explanation as to why, getting them to understand their diagnosis. If you could have the next slide, please. We're listening to Dr. Morgan talking about the myth, fears and taboos. And the first one he mentioned is, I don't have time. And this is what we get constantly. We don't have time. It's nothing to do with us. Bone marrow, it's a bit of gristle or bone. So we have to try and break down these myths that no, it's not gristle and bone, it's a fluid. One of the things we do when we go, last week we were at a university, we were at a sixth form college. We actually have some juice, which is similar in color to the stem cell. And we show that to say to people, this is what's similar, this is what it looks like. They're going to drill into my bone. So we have to go through, and Dr. Morgan, your slides are wonderful in showing the process. We have to explain the processes. And at the moment, for instance, what we're doing to address this, we're actually trying to catch the younger generations by going to schools, colleges, and university. I know the Marrow Group are working in the universities, but we're also trying to get the ethnic groups that are working in the universities, and so we travel there. Last week, we were at a school in South London, where we're trying to get the 6 formers to join the register to make sure we can catch them as early as possible. And we found that if maybe we speak to the students, they can then take it back to their parents. And educating the young, we feel, is the best way we can go about it. We have to explain to a lot of the Black community that we're not going to give their information to the police because they think that we're going to go through this and give their DNA to the police. They have sickle cell trait. They can join if you have sickle cell trait. I have sickle cell trait, but I actually was on the register until, unfortunately, I become too old, so I had to come off. So it's all these myths and fear, and the bit about, well, God will take care of it. And we tell them that let your prayers, as well as the medical technology and science, work to help us save these people's lives. It is a needle in a haystack because of the diverse breakup. We're one of the most diverse group of people in our ethnicity, and we need to get them more. Next slide, please. What we tell our community is that we want them to become heroes, because we need heroes to save these people's lives. And this campaign actually works very well with the young people, because we tell them you can be a hero. There is the need for them to step forward and join in and let people know what is happening and how they can save lives. Daniel managed to get his donor. That came from a lady in America, which was a 50-year-old lady. He survived until he was 21. He had his transplant at the age of 12. He went on to university, where he was hoping to be at the 2012 London Olympics as a physiotherapist. But unfortunately, due to the length of time he spent having the chemotherapy and treatment, he developed other illnesses, whereby he needed to have sometimes 4 or 5 blood transfusion each week. And also he needed organ donations. That's why the ACLT actually works across stem cell, organ, and blood donation. Next slide, please. This is a picture of David Airwood, who actually donated his stem cell. He came to a recruitment drive that the ACLT was holding at the Notting Hill Carnival, and where he joined the register and went on to donate his stem cell to a patient in America. And it's, as Dr. Morgan said, it's quite a simple process once it's explained. And we always tell people you're giving the gift of life to someone. And imagine what you would want to do if it was a member of your family. Next slide, please. These are some of our successful campaign. The first one you can see is Daniel meeting his donor, Doreen Carney, in America. The next picture is actually Kamisha, who's Daniel's cousin. She joined the register to help to see if she could match Daniel, but didn't. So she went on to match someone else. And these are just some of it. Day by day, we're actually getting calls from people telling us what they've been. Anthony Nolan tells us that they've found matches. So we're really pleased about that. Next slide, please. What can members of the WI do? We would actually ask you if you would actually talk to people. Invite, for instance, you go to churches or you have other organizations. Let them know the need for more donors. Ask them to invite organizations like the ACLT or even Anthony Nolan. or DKMS into your churches, that they can give talks about it. We actually hold recruitment drives at churches. We're doing it in corporates, and so it's just being aware and ensuring that you tell people about the need. And there's so many desperate people out there waiting. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope I haven't gone over my time.
Thank you very much, Verna. No, you haven't at all. Can I call on Julia Reinstein, a student at Sussex University, to present, please?
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Good. I'm just going to share my screen. So I'm going to talk a bit about my story of being diagnosed with AML and then having a transplant and finally going back to uni in between COVID, but kind of managing to go back to a sort of semi-normal life. So I was in my first year of university here at Sussex, and I was doing a lot of things. I was very busy and I had some symptoms that I didn't think anything of. So I had a high heart rate. I think resting was about 120 beats per minute. Normal is supposed to be sort of between 60 and 100, so it was quite high, and when I wasn't doing anything, and I just passed it off as anxiety because I was busy and I had a lot of things to worry about, a lot of things to think about. I also had some bruises on my body. I was doing Legally Blonde the musical, and I was in a lot of dances, and a lot of the other girls, you know, in the dances had bruises and cuts everywhere from falling over or, you know, lifts or props flying around stage. So I dismissed that one too. I was really exhausted. I think I must have slept 10 or 11 hours a night, still waking up really tired. But I passed it off as nothing because I was doing 2 musicals, a science degree, I was socializing. I also bled quite easily, which was strange. I recently had an ear piercing and it just wouldn't stop bleeding. And I'd had a few before, so I wasn't sure why, but I passed it. I just didn't think anything of it. And I also had a few infections. All throughout my teenage years, I had always had tonsillitis 3 or 4 times a year. So again, I passed it off as nothing. But I was speaking to my dad, who is a doctor, and I kind of sort of talking about how a lot of things that were happening were a bit strange simultaneously. And he said that I should go get a blood test. So I went to A&E to get a blood test, and the doctor saw me, and on the 23rd of February, oh, that's the wrong day, sorry, 2019. 23rd of February, 2019, I was diagnosed with AML. When I was first told, I thought, what the hell is leukemia? Again, because my dad is a doctor, I knew something about it. I knew that it was some kind of cancer, but I didn't really know what. So my next thought was, what is the survival rates like? Am I going to die? And being the age that I am, I went on Google and looked up survival rates, and it said 50 to 60%, which I thought, wow, that's not that high. And then I thought, okay, does treatment start now or in a week? And when I asked to go back to finish my run of musical theatre shows, the consultant looked at me sort of in disbelief and said, no, you can't leave the hospital. It's too dangerous for you to leave the hospital at all. You can't even go back to your flat. And then it started sort of to sink in. And she said, we want to start treatment right away. And because I was diagnosed here in Sussex and I was living in London with my parents before university, she said it'd be better to treat it in London. And then she wasn't sure if I needed a transplant or not at the time. It sort of depends on specific mutations of my leukemia, and that would all be dealt with in London. So after a few genetic tests on my cancer, it turns out I did need a transplant. So I was started on chemotherapy right away. A few problems came up immediately. I was having cannulas, which are sort of needles that help with transfusions and fluids in your arms. I was having them put in 3 or 4 times a day. And so I got a clot in my arms and I couldn't lift them properly. So my mum had to brush my teeth for me for a few days. I was actually diagnosed 2 weeks before my 19th birthday. So on my 19th birthday, I had a few friends come around. We had pizza. I was actually able to go home for a few hours to see my dog for the day, which was nice. And yeah, I just had a lot of friends visiting me, and we kind of did what we could with the circumstances. I know you're all thinking, what about my hair? So I actually had a hairdresser come up to my ward and cut my hair because I had quite long hair. And the nurses said that when it starts to come out, it'd be better to just have it short so that it's not a lot of hair coming out quickly. It's just sort of a little bit of hair. And that's what I looked like after my haircut, which didn't actually look that bad, if I may say so myself. I have a younger brother and he wears glasses and we had the same haircut. So this is what we look like next to each other. I don't know how many of you can tell the difference. I couldn't for a bit. And eventually my hair started to come out and I thought, I don't want to be dealing with, you know, clumps of hair on my pillow every night and every morning. So my parents shaved it off for me. And when I first looked at myself on my phone with no hair, this is what I did. I was shocked, but you know, it's just part of the process, a side effect of chemotherapy. So I powered through. And this is what I looked like for most of the rest of my treatment. I had a headscarf on. And that's just a photo of me smiling, not looking shocked, with no hair, but most of the time I did wear a headscarf. So I did my first cycle of chemotherapy at home and I was doing quite well. So I did the second one. Sorry, I did the first cycle of chemotherapy from hospital and the second one from home. So I don't know if you can see in this photo, but I'm carrying a bag and that bag has the chemotherapy in it and it was attached to me 24 hours a day for 5 days. So I had to go into hospital every day to check that it was still running smoothly, but I was able to do it from home. This is, I think, about a quarter of the medications I was sent home with from the hospital. And that's my mum laughing at how many it is. And we organized it in a little box and had a nice Excel spreadsheet of which ones I had to take when. And then I was finally in remission after 2 cycles of chemotherapy and my friends decided to make a few fun photos. Remission in leukemia is if less than 5% of your bone marrow is leukemia cells, and I got down to 2%, which was pretty good. So I had a lot of these photos coming in from my friends. So finally, after 2 cycles of chemotherapy, I was going to have a transplant. I don't have many photos from my transplant day, unsurprisingly. This is one of the few photos I did find. So the way it worked was I was in my hospital room with my family and 2 nurses came in with just a bag of cells and they put a cannula in my arm, just actually on the back of my hand. And the infusion took about an hour and a half and they just let it flow through naturally. There was no surgery, there was nothing special. It was just us sitting about watching the fluid go into my veins. Again, this is just to show you, this was my morning pills actually. So I think that's 10 pills in the morning. And then again was 5 or 6 midday and then 10 in the evening. So it was a lot of pills a day. That's what I looked like after my transplant. I think I look a bit tired. I slept a lot that day. It kind of takes a lot out of you. And there was a whiteboard in my room and my mum actually drew a photo every single day of sort of what went on in the day and just something to look forward to. So day 0 is your transplant day and it allows you to sort of track how far along your progress you are. So today I worked it out, it was actually day 868 after my transplant. So it's about 2.5 years. A lot of questions I get asked are, you know, how long did it take to find a match? My match took about 3 months to find. They had a lot of donors that were 7 or 8 out of 10. And as Rhys mentioned, 10 out of 10 is really what you want to have. And eventually they settled on a 9 out of 10, which was pretty good. It was my nurse who told me that we'd found a match, but they're working really closely with Anthony Nolan the whole time. I don't know my donor. I don't know who they are. I can contact them after 2 years of anonymity if I want to, but obviously they have to also say yes to being contacted by me. I don't know if I'll contact them soon. I feel like I'll know when I know, but at the moment I haven't thought about it much, to be honest. And now, after 2.5 years, my immune system is mostly back to normal. So when you wipe out your bone marrow, all of your memory cells for all your childhood vaccines and every cold you've ever had get wiped away. So I've had to start being re-immunized and carry on, getting more immunization. So I've had all my childhood ones again, and I just have a cold all the time because I'm working through all those ones to get my memory cells back. So again, these are just some photos that my mum drew, which I thought might be nice to share. All I wanted to eat was hummus, and I wasn't allowed to eat any hummus because when you're going through a transplant, like Rhys said, you have a really crappy immune system. So you're not allowed to eat any raw fish, any unwashed fruit, any uncooked vegetables. And apparently hummus has raw chickpeas in them, so I couldn't have that. Day 12 was the day that my neutrophils went up. So neutrophils are a white blood cell. And when your neutrophils go up from 0, it basically shows that the transplant has worked and the stem cells have magically found their way into your bone marrow and are actually making cells. And then day 21 was when I left the hospital to go home, and my dog is right there in the photo, if you can see. So I went home and I started to do some normal things like going out for my friends' birthdays. And when you leave the hospital on that day, hopefully you don't go back. So basically after my transplant was finished and I went home, that was it for my treatment. And it was just then, it was about 6 months of recovery. After being compared to Jack from A Nightmare Before Christmas quite a lot, I finally started to grow some hair back. And now my hair is a lot longer, as you can see. So this has been about 2 years of growth. And this is just, oh yeah, when I went back to university, because I missed the musical by a week when I was diagnosed, I actually performed in the musical that was going on when I came back, which was quite nice. It was Chicago the Musical. So it was really nice of the society here to include me in that. This is just a photo of the comparison between, they're a year apart. And obviously the first photo is a few months after I was diagnosed, and the second photo is about a year after my transplant. So yeah, once I got better, I got better really, really quickly. But they said that having the transplant was absolutely essential. And it was very likely that had I not had the transplant, I would have relapsed no matter the amount of chemotherapy, and I probably wouldn't be here today. So I'm very, very grateful for whoever that donor is, and maybe I'll meet them someday. Thank you for listening.
Julia, thank you very much sincerely for being prepared to share that with us. I'm sure we were all, like me, very moved, and you are remarkably brave, or amazingly brave, to share that with us. Thank you so much. Finally, can I hand over to Ruth Ainsworth, who's a WI member from the League of Ladies WI. Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Nikki. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Nikki says, I'm a member of the League of Ladies WI, Derbyshire Federation, and the Wild at Heart Virtual WI. I'm here today to share with you my experience of joining the register and becoming a potential stem cell donor. I knew very little about stem cells and the register, if I'm completely honest, until the resolution landed on my doormat. And it was really the first line of the resolution that hit me. Every 20 minutes, someone in the UK is diagnosed with blood cancer. And to me, that meant that at our monthly meetings, potentially 9 people had had that diagnosis. And now I could actually do something to help. Joining the register was an easy decision for me. Unfortunately, at the time, my mum was losing a battle with kidney failure. And after being on the organ transplant list for many years and failing to find her match, we were told that we would no longer be strong enough to survive an operation. She was removed from the list and we wouldn't be finding a donor. Now, I know that organ and stem cell donations are 2 very different things, but if I could help somebody and stop another family from being in my situation of fighting a losing battle, whilst I was still alive and still had all my organs, then why wouldn't I? So I logged on to the DKMS website and I answered 12 simple questions. That checked that I was a compatible donor, and I ordered the swab kit. But then I went back to the literature that was sent from NFWI, and it said that only 2% of the UK were registered. So I thought, how do I spread the word? Now, this was July 2020, and although restrictions were easing and we were coming out of a lockdown, the WIs weren't able to meet still, and I couldn't simply just tell our members to join up. So the idea crossed my mind to film the process and send out to show everybody how easy the swab kit was. So that's what I did. The day the pack arrived, I set up the camera on my phone and videoed the process. It may not have been pretty, but it took less than 10 minutes and it could potentially grow the register. I've shared my video with my own WI and across my local community, and hopes that you'll all get to see it on the WI social media platform soon. that few minutes you take out of your day to join the register could mean the world to somebody else. As a WI, we've since arranged for our members to have a virtual talk from a lady in our own town, Glossop, whose son got a diagnosis that any parent dreads, and their battle to get him a donor. We've also put her in contact with all local secondary schools to encourage and inspire young people to join the register as soon as they're able. Campaigning that if for any reason you can't join the register, be it health, age, or beliefs, you can spread the word and still encourage others to join. Becoming a potential donor was so quick and easy, it was painless and it didn't cost me a thing. By joining the register, I could stop another family like mine from fighting a losing battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you all for sharing your thoughts. We're now going to move on to questions. And as I said earlier, the Q&A button is at the bottom of your screen to the right of the green button that says share your screen. But while we're waiting for people to type their questions in, can I ask a question to you all? And I don't know who would be best to answer it. From our point of view, thinking of the WI, what do you find is the most effective way of raising awareness of the need for more stem cell donors? So what way works best? Do any of you got any feelings? Maybe Werner.
The best way we find is actually face-to-face. During the pandemic, we went online and did a lot of webinars to get people in, but we found that its best way is if you're actually face-to-face, explain to people all the processes and the reason why they will, then you can get them to join. Also, it's quite simple because we travel with the, we'll arrange to have like the swab kits and things with us. So we actually make sure that they can do the swab kits and then send it off. It's really good now since COVID, Anthony and Nolan have gone online. So what we do is we go out with a list of QR codes and they can click on it and it gets them on the register straight away. Then we get them to do the swab. The best way is is face-to-face, explaining all the proper procedures because people have a lot of questions and we can answer questions at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Ruth, I think your hand's up.
Yeah. One of the things I was just going to say is hearing real life stories. So from hearing from somebody in our local community who has been through the whole process and hearing Julia's story today really inspires myself as a member, and I know it inspires our ladies too.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any more questions? Can I call on maybe Anne? Have you got a question for me?
Hi, Nikki. I have to say I've been really impressed with the speakers because from each angle that we've heard of, and we've thought of different issues. You have to see how Rhys went through the process of actually giving stem cells himself and seeing that actually wasn't that bad, because I always had this thought in my mind that it was going to be painful, that you would be ill for quite some time afterwards, but to be able to recover quickly was really important. And then to hear about the lack of donations from members of the BME community, it is a worry because like every other community, we are all affected by this. And to hear Julia's story again, you know, I could have cried through it to think that you just started university and were faced with this, and yet you're saying it all with such a cheery disposition, as if, oh, well, it was just like going into town, really. Whereas we know that probably it was the most heartbreaking thing that you've ever had to go through. And then to bring it full circle and hear Ruth's story about how she got involved and got herself on the register, and how our campaigns are making such a big difference, touching each member in different ways. And somebody once said about the WI that it's the strong but quiet and powerful voice. You know, we've got not far off 200,000 members. So if each and every one of us only manages to persuade one person to go on the register, you know, there's a good chance that quite a few people's lives will be saved, and that they will have a much longer and healthier existence. So really, I haven't got a question, but my comment is that, you know, events like this are so important to make it real, to make it that we can see that actually we can make a difference. So thank you each and every one of you for your contribution. Nikki.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, I have a question now from Jan Marsden. I'll read it to you. Who could we work with in West Sussex in partnership to raise awareness so information swabs can be given as Verna suggested? Rhys, would you be able to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, sorry. Sorry, I should say me and Julia, by the way, are in the same office because we're both at Sussex. So it might just be easier if I keep us on like this. So yeah, in West Sussex, I mean, who can you work with? I mean, first of all, me and Julia like doing this kind of thing. So we're in Sussex, so we're happy to come along to any events and do anything we can to kind of promote the register if we can. Other than that, you're looking at really the organisations which have been mentioned several times today, Anthony Nolan, DKMS, they'll happily send out materials, information booklets. The other important thing as well is they'll send you an eligibility booklet as well. So there are certain things which exclude you from donating stem cells. So take Julia, for example, now she'd love to donate something back, but she often tells me that, but unfortunately, if you previously suffered from cancer, you aren't able to donate stem cells. So those kind of things are really, I think, helpful to have. Yeah, I think that those organisations are so keen to help local communities that no matter where you are, whether it's West Sussex or anywhere else in the country, they can help you out.
As you said, anywhere in the country, you don't have to rely on them being in the area you're in. You can actually visit the Anthony Nolan website or DKMS website and complete the form, as Ruth said, and then they would then send you the kit, the cheek swabs for you to actually, it's just something like this, just swabs, anyone who's been doing COVID tests will understand it now. And just go on the website, complete the questionnaires, and they'll send you the kit, which you just put back in the post to them. And you're on the register, you know, giving hope to someone.
Thank you very much, Verna. There is a lady trying to ask a question, but I don't think I'm able to see it. I'm just going to have one last go. 1 second. Okay, I'm right. I don't think this is the question, but I have got another one from Sue Gill to Verna. Do you work across the country in schools? If not, do you have volunteer training?
We do volunteer training, and it's funny that we act as if we're very big, but we're a small team. There is 5 of us in the office, but we work with a lot of volunteers, and we just travel around the country where it's needed. Also, if it's like, we tend to go sixth form colleges mostly because they're the age group we're actually working with. We have volunteers around the country where we can ask them if they're available, but as you know, people work and they have to do it in their own time. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. I think as so many people are joining during their lunch hours, I'm going to draw the questions to a close now. But just to thank all 4 of our speakers for your time today and for presenting such different angles on this important campaign. And thank you all to our participants. We can't see you, but we know you're there. As Anne mentioned earlier, the strength of the WI campaigning rests with our membership. The WI has nearly 200,000 members spread throughout England and Wales. And each year, this membership chooses a new campaign, and there is a well-tested pathway to ensure every member in every corner of the WI empire knows about the new campaign and understands not only why the campaign exists, but most importantly, how the WI hopes each member will respond to the campaign and play their part. Can I confess that today I felt hugely guilty? I knew what the WI wanted me to do. The WI wanted me to ensure that those in my family who were eligible signed up to one or other donor register. My children are of mixed ethnicity. Don't look at me, Werner, but I had failed. Last night, I was speaking to my youngest daughter, and as usual, she asked me what I was up to. I told her about this talk. Oh, she said, I meant to tell you, both James, that's her partner, and I have signed up. Why, I said. Ma, she answered, you have gone on and on and on about it, which proves that sometimes when you go on and on and on, your children actually listen. So, success. So can I hand over to Anne for her closing remarks? Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and a special thank you to all our speakers today, to Rhys, Werner, Julia and Ruth. As I said, you've brought something amazing to this discussion. It really has been a very, very inspiring webinar. And the beauty of having it on webinar and it being recorded is that it will be available to watch again. And for those who weren't able to join us today, they will be able to listen to it from my WI, which will be brilliant, because we know that timings of this sort of event is difficult for many people. Not everybody has their lunch hour at the same time. And sadly, if you're a farmer, you often end up not having a lunch hour at all. So I hope that those of you that are on the call and those of you that are listening again have been inspired by the discussion, because this really is a very, very important campaign. I can't emphasize enough. This is a matter of life and death for so many people. And we in the WI can make that huge difference. Have a look at the material that's been prepared for you by the Public Affairs team. We have a great toolkit for you to be able to help encourage others to sign up for this, give you the direction of where to go for the kits, etc. And we will make a difference. So thank you all for a wonderful webinar, and let's hope that the register doubles in no time at all. Diolch yn fawr, thank you.
Thank you very much for your invitation, and for those listening, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.